Okay, shall we get started? Welcome to the CARCEIT webinar today with Dr. Marcelo Lopez. And today's webinar's topic, or the title is called Teaching Mixed Age Groups in Rural, Ungraded Kazakhstani Students. I just want to remind you today that this session is being recorded. And we want to thank Dr. Dushan Shamatov for having Dr. Marcelo be reconnected to us via CARCEIT. When I first joined the doctoral program here at Graduate School of Education at Nazarbayev University, in my first year, I would see Dr. Lopez working on his dissertation. So it's so good to see him back here today. For those of you who are joining for us for the first time, CARCEIT, or Central Asian Research Center for Educational Innovation and Transformation, was established in 2022, and we're generously funded by the Nazarbayev Fund. And the focus of CARCEIT is to contribute to the global knowledge and theory, influence education policy, leadership and practices, and foster a regional education research community and culture through the grant offering through the Nazarbayev Fund. Let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Lopez. So he holds a bachelor's degree in business administration from Mexico, a master's degree in marketing from the UK, and a PhD in education from Kazakhstan, from Nazarbayev University. With over 3 decades of teaching experience, he is a certified language instructor, CELTA, and a skilled cross-cultural trainer, facilitating effective communication across cultural divides. In his research endeavors, Dr. Lopez has focused on challenging environments, particularly rural schools, gaining a profound understanding of their unique challenges and opportunities by engaging with stakeholders. This insight has empowered him to spearhead community development throughout Kazakhstan. He currently works as a director of Lola Marketing, and he's currently a manager of Ganuk GANUC. So without further ado, I turn the session over to Dr. Lopez.
Hello. Well, Pete, thank you very much for the presentation and introduction. Thank you very much for being here. Naurin, it's a pleasure to see you back again after a year. And well, just I'm very happy to be back to NU and being able to share part of the research I did, and hopefully it will be relevant for those who are listening to us. And should you have any question, please feel free to ask, whether it is the chat, or I don't know if it's possible to raise your hand, and then we would look at this. But feel free to interrupt me at any time. I will, as it is planned, I'm going to go through the presentation. And then we will have some time for some questions. So, but again, if you feel like interrupted me before that, please feel free to do so. So, well, as Pete had already mentioned, the name of the research, you see it in front of you, and this is what we're going to address today. So since we have a lot to do, it's going to be 3.5 hours. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. It's not going to be that much, but this is what I'm going to try to address. And here we go. Well, first I want to start with the background. So something that I saw, and something that it was relevant when I was doing the research, is the shift from access to education to quality of education in Kazakhstan. And as in other countries from the Soviet Union, it was easy to access education everywhere. Okay, so I mean, even a village would have the school and the teachers, and it was not an exception even after the collapse of the Soviet Union. So there was a lot of, there is access to education in Kazakhstan. However, well, there was a problem, and the problem had to do with quality. And this is something we have seen in different studies. For example, we would look at numbers in PISA where we would see, something is not working well. So we have schools everywhere. People are coming to our schools, but the level of the instruction that we're delivering is not the proper one, or is not at the standards of the global arena. And therefore, Kazakhstan starts making changes, and those are the reforms that we have seen so far. It's been probably 20 years since we have started seeing those reforms. And in the last decade, we saw a lot of changes happening, and some of those changes had to do with rural schools. So what is the research problem? When considering the importance of the rural schools, as you see the numbers, we have many rural schools in the country. And in certain regions, the numbers are very high, as it is the case of Akmola region, where we have a lot of rural schools, and particularly ungraded schools. So those schools where we teach single age groups and mixed age groups. So given their number, it was important to understand how these schools operate and what changes are happening within those schools. Because although we see all these numbers, and when I started doing the previous literature review, it was clear that we didn't have so much information in terms of how do they teach, what are the strategies that teachers use, how do they manage how do they manage not only the single groups but the mixed age groups. So we didn't have that information, and that was one of the reasons why I did that. At the same time, I saw part of what the policies were doing. I mean, some of the policymakers were doing, and one of those things had to do with the resource centers and the boarding schools. Something that I am against, but we can discuss this later. The purpose of the study, therefore, was to understand from the perspective of teachers, how are they teaching in these schools? How are they teaching in these schools, right? In these ungraded schools, especially in these mixed age groups. All of this to understand the factors that are helping them to do better practices, or that are stopping them to improve their practices. So that was the purpose of the study. I have 3 research questions. 3 research questions, and well, the first one had to do with, as I told you, I didn't know, and we didn't know how teachers were teaching in these schools. So this was very important. For me, it was very important to understand how were those teachers teaching before mixed age groups. So this was the first question. The second one, to understand the rural context, because I didn't want to look just at the teaching practices without considering what is outside. Then the policies regulating those schools and the school conditions. So I wanted to take this as a whole, or at least to have different aspects that I would consider to understand what was happening inside the classrooms. And then once I would see the teaching practices, what I would understood, the context, the policy, and the conditions of those schools, then the next step would be, and was to ask those teachers about the opportunities and challenges that they see to improve the teaching within those schools. I would move to the literature review. So what did I do? Well, this is what I did. So first, I needed to, basically there are 4 topics that I consider: rurality, rural education, curriculum, and teaching practices. So again, as I started doing research in terms of understanding if there were documents, if there were previous studies concerning teachers teaching in mixed age groups in Kazakhstan. Okay, so the first thing was to think about the term rurality. And this is one of the challenges that I found, because it is not very clear. And it's not very clear in many documents that talk about rurality, what rurality is. So this was one of the biggest challenge that I had. So we don't know what we're talking about. So we believe that we all know what rural is, but when we look at documents that mention rurality, it is very hard to understand what rurality is. And then to see, are we, because it is possible to have a mixed age group in an urban area. It's not necessarily only on a rural area. So that's why it was important to know what rurality is. And above this, it was also important to understand the issues that they have, to see whether the Kazakhstani context would share some of those issues. So what I did, I found just some definitions. Then I found the main issue in this case. A couple of issues that rural communities that are poor and that the people are living rural areas, and the definition, as you can see over here. After this, I moved to rural education. Okay, so now I understand what rurality is. Then I wanted to know what rural education was. Here also, I try to focus on delivering a definition to see what the main issues were and some of the characteristics. Yeah. And then this helped me to analyze further whether this is something that I would also find in the schools in Kazakhstan. For instance, we have right here, some of these characteristics, and then that I found in my study, like rural schools create a community environment. Yeah, something that happened in Africa, and this is something that we also see in Kazakhstan. So that's why this was relevant and very relevant for my student, to see whether there were things we could compare or we could use for the study. After this, then of course the next important part of the literature review was the curriculum. So we cannot talk about teaching practices without an understanding of what teachers base their classes on, and the curriculum was the key. So therefore, I check about the curriculum, and then I also did, and I will tell you a little bit later about the analysis of the policies in Kazakhstan, and within that analysis, I also, of course, look at the curriculum. And the curriculum is very relevant because then I will tell you a little bit later what one of the issues that we have in those schools, and one of the main issues has to do with the curriculum. Then the last one was to understand what a teacher practices. Yeah. I wanted to know, how do teachers teach mixed age groups in Kazakhstan? I wanted to know what are the strategies they use. I also wanted to know, how do teachers teach mixed age groups in other countries? So those are things that are very important for me to learn. And then based on that, I would see if we would have similar practices in Kazakhstan, or again, if we would have something completely different. And it will be very interesting because you will see, well, I cannot tell you the outcomes yet. I want to this is like a movie. I want this to be like a movie. So I don't want to give you the end yet. Okay. After that, I did an analysis of the policy context in terms of education, where I found how relevant ungraded schools are for the policymakers. There are documents that show the plans in regards to those schools specifically. So we talk about schools in general, but there are also documents that are talking about ungraded schools particularly, and with plans similar to the ones that we saw before. Something like this, number 5, for example. Yeah, this is exactly part of those documents. So the outcome of those documents, and not only in terms of documents, but something that is happening. So after this, so this is basically how I did my literature review and the analysis of the policy context in the country. After that, then, well, to decide what the methodology was. And then in terms of the methodology, well, this is a qualitative study. What I decided to do is a multiple case study. And I use in this study interviews, observations, and document analysis. I visited 5 schools. These are the schools. My cases are the teachers. So these are the teachers that I interviewed, that I observed. Yeah. This is the instruction, language of instruction at school. And this is the number of students per school. Per schools. And I'm talking about different grades, not only one grade. Okay. I mean, it's number of students per school. Okay. So with this, you can see that, for example, you would have grade 3 and grade 4 with 4 students, for instance. Okay. So you would have an idea of what it is like to be in those schools. Some of these schools, given the lack of space, would have 2 shifts as well. This is something important, relevant. So, because then we would have to teach all the grades, but then they wouldn't have enough room to teach all the grades. And also the complexity, as you see, like, I mean, not only do they have to teach groups together, but they would have to teach them in Russian and in Kazakh. Which means if we had 4 students, for instance, for grade 2 and 3, then maybe 2 students would be in the Russian class, and then 2 students would be in the Kazakh class. So again, it makes things a little bit more complicated, more complex. Okay, well, now I'm going to come to the interesting part. So the findings. So one of the problems that I found was this, that teachers are not trained to teach mixed age groups. So what happens when you go to the university, where the teacher goes to the university, they are trained to teach these groups that we see in the cities. So we have 30 students and we teach, and all of these 30 students have only one teacher and one subject. So this is how the teachers, or most of the teachers, are trained at universities. So when they come to these rural schools, they face a situation where now they have not only single groups, but mixed age groups. Mixed age groups, so those groups where we have grade 2 and 3 together, for instance. So this is one of the things that I found, and and at the same time, I'm writing right here what the solution could be, which would be and to develop and to give a specific training. Why a specific training? Because again, every time they would come to the cities and get retrained, the training that they receive is very similar to the training that they received before starting teaching. So again, teaching single age groups. Yeah, and especially in big cities, this is what is happening. So I mean, if I am an English teacher and I am teaching in an ungraded school, then I would go to the city, get trained again based on the same principle of single age groups. So this is one of the main findings. The second one, again related to the research question number 1, has to do with the possibility that teachers have to make changes. This is very interesting because despite the fact that you would have a curriculum, they have some room to move and change things so they would work a little bit better. Yeah, and especially when the curriculums are not, when the curriculum is not aligned. So what they are trying to do, some of these teachers, they are trying to add content that would be more relevant to the students based on what they have around, based on the context, based on what they know, rather than just basing their lessons of what the curriculum says or what the book says. Because sometimes the reality is very, very far from what they have seen. So again, I'm probably talking about languages because this is my area of expertise, but then you would see a teacher talking about, I don't know, talking about London, yeah, and the guy, the student in rural school, has not even been in the capital of the country, yeah, or in a big city. So we are telling and we are using information that sometimes is very, very far away from where they are. Yeah, and so it's difficult for them to grasp things. I mean, we need to, or the teacher could actually use, instead of being in a classroom, they could actually be outside and then connecting to whatever they have. If they have a cow, they can use a cow to learn something. Yeah, if they have a tree, they can use a tree to learn something, as opposed to being in the classroom all the time. So some of the teachers can do this, and some of the teachers are doing that. However, there are some others who would have to stick to whatever the curriculum says, and they keep on teaching what the curriculum says without using their context as a very powerful tool to make them learn things that are relevant. In regards to question number 2, and in terms of the context, what I saw and what I found out is that the community is really engaged into what the school is doing. So not only would they attend the festivals, but they would also help in whatever is needed. There was a case where the community got together to work on the refurbishment of the school. So now the school looks as if it were just new. And this is not something that they were waiting for the government to do. So the government provided the material and they did the work. And because of that, now the school looks completely different. And this is something very important for them to develop also their outcomes. And something that I have not seen, for example, in cities. Yeah, now in cities, I mean, I would come to the meetings and I would hardly see, I mean, if we have 20 kids, I would hardly see 5 or 7 parents attending those meetings. And we as parents are not connected. Yeah, we have a chat, but we never talk about how to help the schools. And this is something that we see in rural schools, and something I think this is an opportunity that they have to develop their ties even further, and to develop the practices at school. In terms of policies, the research question number 2, as I mentioned before, has to do with a misaligned curriculum. What does it mean? Again, the curriculum is designed to teach single age groups. It is not designed to teach mixed age groups. So in other words, when I have a mixed age groups, I don't have one, as a teacher, I don't have one class. I have 2 classes. Yeah, I have to teach class 2 and I have to teach class 3. So it means I have to divide my 45-minute lesson into 2. Yeah, and this is very, very difficult. And so what I'm telling you is that I am giving you half of the content that I would give you if you were in a single age group. So then you can imagine, like, okay, so if we have this problem, then now I understand why they do not have the outcomes that we expect. Well, if they are having half of the classes that another student in a single age group would have, how would I ask them to give or to be at the same level? School conditions. Well, I mean, all of these schools are small, or most of them, at least 4 out of the 5 were small, very, very small. And I mean, we can see it from 2 sides. One side is, of course, the opportunity, because the ratio teacher-student is very, very low. So we have the opportunity to be as a teacher, to be very close to the student. And I think this is great to understand what their needs are. I mean, learning needs are, and to try to address them accordingly, as opposed to the teacher who would have 30 or 40 students in one group. So I guess this is one of the advantages of these small schools. And with that, the student center approach. Okay, we know what they want, so we can prepare our lessons as teachers accordingly. I mean, so this is again one of the things that we could do, and but some of the things that the teachers wouldn't do, because again, the practices, the training has to do with a complete different approach. Yeah, the teacher center approach. The teacher is the main figure. We must look at the teacher. The teacher is in front of us. The students are all lining, so they are in their desks, and then they're always looking at the teacher. So again, so we have that, but it would be possible to make some changes. And then in regards to research question number 3, yes, well, one of the problems that I saw, and not only the ones that I saw, but what teachers told me, is there's too much work. And I don't mean that like, well, of course, I mean, they're supposed to work, but what I mean is that whenever you have 2 groups, yeah, you have 2 groups, but you still get paid as if you had only one. So I have to prepare for 2 groups. I have to teach 2 groups, but I get paid as if I had only one. So this is also very very difficult to manage. Yeah, because again, you would have single age groups and mixed age groups in those schools, but at the same time, it would be very difficult to tell one teacher, would you like to teach this mixed age group next year? Of course, they wouldn't want to do that because they would prefer having a single age group. They would get paid the same amount of money, but they wouldn't have to prepare that much, and then they wouldn't have to check homework for two different groups, even though they are, I mean, or two different grades, even though they are in the same group. Let me tell you that the previous one, let's say that's from the bad side, but from the good one, I saw that the teachers are very, very committed. Yes, they some of them. I remember there was this situation when one of them was telling me, "Well, I expect to see more students in the future, so we could open a bigger school." I mean, he was so positive about this. Of course, when you see the numbers of people who are leaving the village, you know that will not happen. However, they have this will to help the students. Some of the teachers are willing to get trained, even though it is not paid by the school. So some of the teachers are willing to use their money to pay for training and for all the costs. So it means moving to a city because the training would not happen in the village, so they would have to travel to the city, sometimes sleep in the city, and then come back to the village. And all of these would be covered by the teacher. So yes, you see that the teachers are, at least the ones that I've met, were very, very committed. And the things that we need to look at, and those are the main things that I see. Cohesion, which was very important. As I told you, they are very, very close. Teachers with students, teachers with parents. Everybody knows each other. So this is something that I saw over there. On the other side, migration, many people are leaving. Many people are leaving. So, and right here, right, we have this tension, because on one side, we want to give quality to the students that are in villages, but at the same time, we see that these guys are leaving the cities, and they are leaving to the cities. Yeah, they're leaving to the cities, and well, we see I mean, yes, we are creating better conditions, but at the end of the day, we see that these people are leaving the villages. Misalignment, this is what I explained you in regards to the curriculum. Yeah, and it would be possible to change this. We would have to create a curriculum especially for those ungraded schools, and especially for the mixed age groups. At the same time, the competency, again, if the teachers are not trained to teach mixed groups, we cannot ask for too much. The other thing that I also explained is burnout. So teachers are working too much, and at the same time, there is commitment to improvement. So it's very interesting because they have too much work, but they are ready, let's say, to pay the price because they are committed to improvement, and they want to see changes happening in the village despite the odds. So in conclusion, so the teachers want to see improvement. Yeah. This is what I heard and what I saw. Yeah. And however, teachers need the training and the tools to make things happen. Because despite the ability or the possibility to make changes by themselves, it is still difficult if we do not create the whole picture, and if we don't change some of the conditions to make that happen. Also, I see that unless we change or we make those changes, it's going to be very, very difficult, yeah, to compare and evaluate, yes, urban and rural schools, it will be very, very, very difficult. So we have to take that into consideration. And we have a dilemma. What I told you, yeah, we want to provide the best for those kids over there. But at the end of the day, when we do that, we are pushing them to go to the cities because eventually we do not create the conditions. So I think this is the main problem. The main problem. So even if I give you very good education, what am I going to do in the village? Who is going to employ me? Yeah. Is there any future for me in the village? So this is the dilemma that we see right now, and hopefully something we would work for and change in the future. Right here, I write some of my recommendations. I've been telling you some of them. Yeah, I've been telling you some of them. And hopefully some of them could be used to make changes in those schools. We have success cases in other countries, so we could actually take some of those cases and implement some things, not everything, because of course we have our own conditions, but there are things that have worked very well in other mixed age groups. So we could probably take some of the experiences that some other countries have gathered throughout the years and to implement those in Kazakhstan. Well, I'm ready for your questions. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you so very much, Dr. Lopez. Now I see what your study is about, and it's something that we had discussed things in the future, in the past about. With, I know that you could all start to chat. I realized that the chat wasn't functional before, but if you have any questions, you can start to ask questions in the chat. Meanwhile, I'll get the conversation started with Dr. Lopez. We talked about the Montessori program in the past, where in the case of Italy, they had mixed age groups, students together in the one, Casa Bambina. Are rural schools in Kazakhstan considering those international models at all at this time?
No, they are not. Thank you for the question. No, they are not. But what we also must consider is that if we're looking at a model, we should look at that model that is working in rural schools. Because most of the times when we think about Montessori schools, we see those schools in cities. Okay, and so we have to consider the context as well. So and right here, there is this example, as you see, number one, yeah, Escuela Nueva in Colombia, which is a model that has been developed from mixed age group schools to mixed age group schools. Grade school. So yes, there are models, but they're not being implemented in Kazakhstan.
Thank you. Again, we have opened up our chat for questions or comments. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Okay, unless I'm mistaken.
Asemgul has a question. Yes. Okay.
And for those of you who are listening, I'll read this out loud. Thank you very much for your presentation, Marcelo. I'm curious whether you specifically focused on a particular grade levels, primary, middle, or high school. If you tell more about your cases, maybe it can become clearer. Thank you. From Asengul Ukutova. Thank you.
Okay. Asemgul, thank you for your question. No, I did not focus on a particular grade. Some schools would have from class 1 to class 4, it was just one of them. and then the rest would have from class, at least from class 1 to class 9. Yeah, so, and I would look at, sometimes I look at those who gave me chance to see the class 8 and class 9, that's what I observe. And those who gave me class just to see class grade 2 and grade 3, that's what I did. So the cases were something, again, from grade 1 to grade 9. So the only thing in common, or what I was looking at, was the practice, because they would have mixed age groups, regardless of the grade, mixed age groups or the level. Thank you.
Okay, so she says, okay, I see, thank you. Now, I have permitted all of you to speak. So if you have any questions, you can just unmic yourselves and to start talking. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, I'm waiting for more questions. Please feel free to ask questions. Otherwise, feels like I didn't say much. So please. Okay, Narine, please.
Thank you so much, Marcelo, for your volunteerism, for making yourself available whenever we need you. Last year, you spent a lot of time with us on admissions. As you mentioned, it's a very interesting study, but also there's so much little literature available on this topic. I think most countries have multi-grade schools. Some have many, like Kazakhstan, where population density is low. But most countries do have. However, education ministries just pretend as if multi-grade schools do not exist. The planning, teacher preparation, curriculum development, teaching learning materials, they do not take into account at all the realities of multi-grade schools. You know, in a normal school, a teacher doesn't develop the curriculum. Yeah, they receive guidelines from the ministry. How come we expect a teacher working in rural schools with very few resources compared to urban schools, and expecting them to simultaneously adapt the curriculum, develop? So they do not have the necessary skills, as well as perhaps the authority to amend the curriculum, the assessment systems. I guess my question is about the underlying psychological principles underpinning a good multi-grade model, because most of the schooling, as we know, primarily follows Piaget's developmental psychology and Piaget's stages of learning, where apparently all children of the same age develop and learn at the same page, regardless of their socio-cultural environment, the material resources they have. And I guess that particular model of learning doesn't help at all in multi-grade schools, where you observe teachers following the same model, but with no success. Perhaps multi-grade schooling need to look at other models of learning. And I guess, can you say something about the underpinning understanding of learning that you observed in the lessons and in the schools that you selected for your study?
Thank you, Narine, for the question. And I think this is very, very important and relevant, because what I saw, yes, that this is the approach, just what you mentioned, that is the approach. However, So now it's like my dream and what is happening. So this is the approach. I will use this approach to teach everybody learns the same way. Everybody has eaten. Yeah. So everybody has a family. So everybody has a roof. So that's the approach they follow. And the issue, as you see right here, is that, what is happening is that we have first a guy who is 8 with a guy who is 10 years old together. Yeah. But not only this, the conditions are completely different. Probably, I mean, for example, if I have a learning disability, so we don't have special schools in rural areas. So that child would also be in that group. Okay. And I mean, things like this that we sometimes do not consider, but this is what is happening. So the teacher doesn't know why that kid is not learning. Yeah. And maybe that kid has a learning disability. Yes. But since we have never, I mean, he has never seen a psychologist or a doctor who would tell you we have this problem with this kid, then he's treated as a normal, as another kid. And so we have a huge diversity, but an approach where we have to follow just one line. So yeah, that's what I saw. And again,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
And again, this is another challenge that the teachers have, because again, if I have this type of a student that I don't know how to deal with, I do not have the tools. I mean, if I do not have the tools to teach mixed age groups, so how would I have some tools to teach children who are different?
I guess this is an issue of how we understand education and learning in a formal setting, and we have attached so much significance to learning just the following Piaget's theory. In everyday life, we learn in multi-grade settings all the time. My 14-year-old boy teaches me how to teach my own phone. In everyday living, we keep on interacting regardless of age boundaries. And I guess, were there any instances where you saw teachers using older kids as teachers within those multi-grade schools?
And I think we have to look at probably more at Freire, and then and his theory, and if we want to, I mean, I think that could help us a little bit more to understand the conditions and use the context to develop their learning. So I think Paulo Freire would be,
when done well, like you gave the example of Colombian schools, and sometimes long time ago, Professor Angela Little from the Institute of Education, she led a series of studies working on multi-grade schools in different contexts. And definitely when it was done well, there was evidence that students in multi-grade settings outperformed students in single grade settings within the same country. Yeah? So it's just about thinking what's the best learning approach when you have people of different ages and different grades, yeah, and giving teachers some tools for curriculum adaptation as well as pedagogic tools as well. I think your research will be very useful for our courses in school education. Potentially, a key reading, a PhD thesis is a very long document. Are you thinking of publishing, smaller outputs, shorter outputs?
That would be a good idea. That's what my supervisor had pushed me to do. I haven't done it, but I probably would be a good idea.
Because the field itself is very under-researched, yeah?
Yeah. And this is one of the reasons why I chose it. First, because I had been working in rural schools, And second, because I saw the lack of literature that would give us an understanding of what is happening in those schools.
And I really like you problematizing the concept of rurality. Yeah. Rurality is also, it varies from context to context as well. All this, most rural communities will have something similar. But in England, for example, a country where I lived for quite a long time, like privileged people live in rural areas.
Yeah, wealthy people,
Working class people have to live in urban areas to earn a living. So even in those contexts, a rural school will be very different from a rural community, a rural school in North Kazakhstan or in South Kazakhstan, yeah?
Right. Yeah. This is and this is the reason why I wanted to see the differences in the literature, you see, and to see whether we were talking about the same things or the same conditions or completely different conditions. Because as you say, I mean, if I'm looking at the rural schools in the UK, then and the outcomes, the learning outcomes they would have, of course, they would be completely different based on the conditions, the school conditions that they have.
And also the family conditions as well. As I mentioned, most privileged people, they prefer to live in suburban areas, in rural areas in England, far away from noise and pollution. So even like if we look at learning in a very broad sense, parents are also teachers, yeah? So the learning opportunities available for children in those contexts are very, very different.
Good. More questions, please? Our participants.
Well, if there are no more questions, I'm going to ask a last question, and I'm going to ask Professor Norindrani to close the session, if it's okay.
There is a question in the chat from
there is let me see. Oh, there is. Okay, I'll read this off for everybody. Thank you so much for the insightful presentation. I'm interested in teacher agency in relation to the teaching practices. What might be some of the strategies that develop their agency towards more student-centered learning environment, technology, or varied pedagogical approaches? Thank you.
Well, Sular, thank you for the question. I think that, well, right off the bat, I mean, technology approach, I mean, forget about this, because they don't have the resources. Sometimes they don't have the conditions. Sometimes they don't even have electricity. So I may have a good computer, but I don't have where to plug this in, or I don't have internet. So for instance, so technology-wise, it would be it will be more challenging to think about how we can see teachers work towards a more student-centered approach. In terms of pedagogy, I would say that is the case. So we would have to think about, again, using the context to teach, understanding what the students know, understanding what they need, what they want. So it's a matter of, I would say it's a matter of understanding. And then if you understand, then you can make those changes towards a student-centered approach. So I understand what you need to learn, and then I would act accordingly. I have already listened to what you need, and then I'm preparing my lessons accordingly. And so this is about, again, the pedagogical aspect, not the technological one. And this is how I believe they can create some changes. And thank you for the question.
Okay, thank you, Zulia. So my question, again, I'm not sure if you have an updated information about this or not of the figures. You mentioned about the urbanization aspect where everyone is leaving the rural areas. Are there any cases where the schools are actually closing? Or if the numbers become so low for the schools, does that affect the funding by any way? That's my question. And if you don't have any other questions, I will ask Professor Noreen to close the session, since we have approached around 5 minutes to the 3 o'clock mark.
Well,
thank you.
Yeah, Pete, in regards to the first one, yes, there are numbers, and there are numbers showing you, I mean, how many people are living in those villages. Yes, I mean, there are figures, and there are studies that would tell you, and I mean, there's studies that would tell you, and will show you those numbers, and this is the first one, and then the second one. If you remind me.
There's
The funding, no, the
yeah,
fund. This is one of the good. Thank you very much. Yes, as for the funding, this is something that has changed or that did not change when within the reforms. I mean, the schools would get funding based on the number of students that they would have. However, when they made changes, they didn't touch. So they didn't touch those rural schools. Those rural schools would have the funding regardless of the number of students. It doesn't mean, yes, but it doesn't mean that some of them are not in danger of extinction. Okay, so they may still close one of those schools. Yeah, but I mean, so far, I mean, what I'm saying is that, I mean, at least, for instance, if I have this year 40 students and next year I have 35, I will still have the same money as a director to run my school. But this is one of the concerns that I would have, that I mean, eventually with these, for example, resource centers or these schools, when I'm trying to, I mean, to have all my students there, eventually they could become those centers, and then would be a reason, I have very few students in those schools, so I might as well close it. And that is happening.
Thank you. I have a last comment. It will be valuable if you have a published work on this study and share with us, Marcelo.
Okay. I mean, you can find it. It's already in the repository. You can see. Thank you, Saule, and you can find it. All my studies there in the repository, so you can see it. You can have access to it.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. Noreen.
Thank you very much, Marcelo, for your generosity once again, for sharing your time and your knowledge with us on a topic that is very under-researched and highly relevant for our context in Kazakhstan. And it really makes me think about future direction in terms of my own research priority. Perhaps the way to go ahead is with working with a couple of research training, teacher training universities, and on an action basis, developing a module on multi-grade teaching, preparing teachers for multi-grade teaching, how to, adapt the curriculum, how to adapt the assessment, what are the best underpinning learning theories for a multi-grade context, what are good pedagogic strategies, and then see how it helps teachers' skills and knowledges when they are actually in a rural school. Something has to start.
Right.
Yeah, and I think, as you rightly pointed out, the best way to prepare is the teacher training institutions. Otherwise, you are always relying on in-service training, constantly training them again and again. And I think that's the most cost-effective way of reaching out as many teachers as possible, so that in future, if even an urban teacher gets an opportunity to teach in a rural school, they are not afraid of not having the skills and the strategies to teach in a rural school. So very important area for research in Kazakhstan. And we all look forward to your future development in this area, and perhaps, writing some publications of shorter length that we can use as key readings in our school education modules.
Thank you, Nari, for
Thank
those
you very
words.
much, and to the audience as well for joining us.
Yes, thank you all. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you. And with that, we will close the session. Muchas gracias.
Gracias.